Welcome to the NBA Triple Double Show powered by SportsMemo. I'm your host, Ronald Cabang from WagerTalk.com at UCapper Sports on Twitter. Going to be joined by Jeff Michaels from Wager Talk as well. We'll be talking about Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Heat and the Celtics. I think a lot of us are surprised that we're here, but a few others are definitely not. Huge Boston fans that I know on the side were expecting, obviously the Celtics to win. And they're happy they're here to see a Game 7. But we'll get into that game here. Before we do go into that game and talk about it, I want to talk about what's over at SportsMemo and WagerTalk.com. $9 Monday is today. All picks and packages on the site are available for just $9. We got the free live odds page as well on both sites. The deals page, cappers provide free picks and analysis on a daily basis as well, along with their daily packages over at WagerTalk and SportsMemo.com. Also, before you go to those sites after the show here, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button here on YouTube. With that said, let's get Jeff up here with me. Oh, man, how's everything going, Jeff? I know I'm not sure if you caught Game 6, but it's probably one of the most exciting endings to an NBA game that we've seen in a while. But were you able to catch it live?
Oh, of course. I think, I had, flashbacks to before my actual memory, I guess, because the last time I think I heard a number that the last time a team trailing in a series hit a buzzer beater was Jordan's shot against Cleveland in the playoffs in the 90s.
Yeah.
So big game winning shot there, obviously. Excited to push it to game 7, and my how the narrative changes so quickly on this
It's
series, right?
crazy. Yeah, exactly. I know. I mean, a lot of people were talking about, the adjustments and things like that on the Miami side for the series, and then, what Missoula was going to be able to do. And, I mean, reading into the media, the narrative and all that stuff. And it seems like the players did it themselves. I don't know if you heard that article about them going to Top Golf. Actually, they went to Top Golf after game 3, I believe, when they went down 0-3. And they were talking about it was a players only event, and they all talked it out. They were like, "Yo, if we're gonna make this historic comeback, we're gonna have to trust each other and do all these things." And they've pulled off 3 straight wins here, possibly make history and complete the comeback. A few things that I noticed, obviously on the Miami side, you see Butler struggle a little bit more, right? I mean, he was shooting. He only made 5 out of 21 in the last game. Half of his points were from the free throw line. And Caleb Martin, he continues to impress. He got inserted into the starting lineup for them in the last game, went for 21 and 15 rebounds. On the opposite side, you see Tatum. I mean, he's continued to play more of an all-around game. He became more of a facilitator and trusting his teammates a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's one of the big reasons why they've come back from down from 0-3. Marcus Smart as well. He started to hit his shots, right? He hit 11 threes in the last 3 games compared to just 3 in the first 3. So, we talked about, Coach Missoula struggling with adjustments before the series, but it seems like he's done a few things, at least in the last 3 games, not only from his point, from the coaching aspect, but also the players trusting each other more. What are your kind of takeaways from the last 3 games where the Celtics have been able to come back here?
I just looking at the last game specifically, the two biggest things that stood out to me for this Miami team and actually for the Boston team, I guess as well. Miami took 93 shots last game and they shot 46.7% from 3. Boston took 78 shots from the field and shot 20% from 3. And Boston was -7 in the turnover margin. They only forced 5 turnovers last game and they come out with a win. You know, I don't know who, honestly, I don't know who that says more about.
Yeah,
There's, but kind of what I said. Speaking to the narrative, though, Miami has been the underdog, obviously, this entire postseason. They're an 8 seed. They have this historic run, and they're still on this historic run, obviously. And overnight, it goes from this 8 seed to, oh my God, are they going to be the first team to blow a 3-0 series lead? And nobody even cares that they're an 8 seed anymore. So,
yeah,
in a sense, it's almost like, they went from the underdog for the last month and a half or whatever in the postseason to what you would have assumed for the last 3 days, okay, outside of the city of Boston, that it is a lock for the series.
Yeah.
So now does Jimmy Butler perform with his quote unquote back against the wall for the first time in the postseason? You know,
Hmm. Yeah, that's tough.
so
I mean, it's tough because if you think about Jimmy Butler, in the post game interview, he was like, "We're gonna go game seven." He was pretty confident about it happening, but at the same time, I mean, I think how do they come back after losing a game in that fashion, right? Like mentally, sorry, psychologically, like it kind of hits you pretty hard, right? I mean, how do you bounce back off of that type of loss? But let's get into this game here specifically from a betting aspect, Jeff. I'll start here, and well, one thing that I looked at, I think you also touched SDQL, Jeff, but one thing that I looked at was since 2002. I looked at Game Seven specifically in round two or later. Those games are 26-9 to the under, and it kind of just goes to show, like, the deeper you get into the playoffs, the deeper you get into the series, defenses start to play a little bit better. I mean, and every possession starts to count a little bit more. So they take their time a little bit, right? The pace slows down a lot more. Yeah, I added a couple things to that. If you look at them as home favorites in Game Sevens, coming off of a win, those home favorites are 8-2 straight up, 7-3 against the spread, also 8-2 to the under. Those things kind of point towards the Celtics, also to the under. The road team also went under their team total in 8 of those 10 games as well. This is just like, the other interesting thing too. The last two instances in that trend involved the Celtics. Last season, Celtics beat the Bucks 109-81 in Game 7, and then in the last round, the Celtics took care of the Sixers 112-88. So they're doing it defensively in these Game Sevens, and to me, they picked up a lot of momentum in this 3 game winning streak, and I think it really has to do with all around performance from Tatum. Right, I talked about earlier about how he become more of a facilitator, but also their defense. I know in the last game they didn't create as many turnovers as they did in the previous two, only 5, but they still ended up coming out with the win. They did limit the Heat to what was it, like 33% from the field, so defense has really picked up for them, and I think that continues here in Game 7. So the way that I was looking at it, I mean, you can kind of pivot in so many different directions, but I'll talk about my best bet towards the end of the show. But really, a lot of things are pointing towards the Celtics and the under in some way or fashion. What are your thoughts from a betting aspect here, Jeff?
yeah, I made a comment to you before the show that about how much that this line has obviously dropped from game 6 and coming down from game 5 on a series. It's 210, 215 plus totals for the
Yeah.
first 5 games pretty consistently. But, I think I gotta be looking honestly with maybe a Celtics team total over even. I know that that's not, the way that you would normally bet, but especially with the history of the under here. And I think that the reason I like the team total is because I'm not totally opposed to that full game under. But like you mentioned, the one last year, even as a sole, example, they held Milwaukee to what'd you say, 87 points, I believe you
Yeah, it
said.
was like 81.
And I think that could be a hypothetical situation here. I do think that that's probably the outcome if Boston wins, but I'm not totally shutting the door on Miami here to at least keep it close. And I
Hmm.
think that if they do make this game competitive, I don't really see it being from Miami on the defensive end. I think a lot of what you could give Miami credit for on the defensive side has been their opponent almost shooting themselves in the foot in some instances. So, I do think that there's a potential, obviously, for Boston to go over their team total here and for the full under to
Yeah.
be in question. But, I do think that if Miami can pull this off, I think we have to go over 203.5 points. And I think even
Yeah.
if that is the case, I think that, there's potential for Boston to put up, enough points there too to still go over the total, lose the game, and the game go over. So, I do think that there's a way for both sides to play out here because I'm not ruling Miami out of this game 7 situation, especially with,
Mhm.
I've said it a time or two before, the history of the away team in this series. I mean, Miami's still 8-4 against the spread at the Garden in the last 3 years, and they're still 2-1 in the postseason this year. But obviously, the one we're looking at and the one we're talking about is the most recent blowout loss that kept Boston's season alive. So do we see the Boston team that showed up in that one or the one that showed up in game 1 and game 2 of the series?
Yeah, I think
So
it's
I
pretty
think Boston
correlated.
team total. Yeah, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
think what you mentioned is like you said, it's pretty correlated here. If you look at all the Heat wins, the first three games they all went over, right? And then the next three, the three wins for the Boston Celtics, all those games went under. So really, it could be correlated. If you think Heat win, maybe the look towards the over. If you think the Celtics win, you would probably look towards the under there. If you we were kind of talking right before the show, when it goes to game 6 and game 7, the average total, right? What is that average drop off? I'm looking at it here in the SEQL database, and going back to like 2016, I looked towards the more modern basketball here. So since 2016, in game sixes, round two or later, the average total is 213.8, right? And if we go to game sevens, in rounds two or later, the average is 206.8. So there's a huge drop off. So it's not uncommon that it comes down this much from game 6 to game 7. I think it went from like what 210 to 11 to today's, which is what 204. So it's not uncommon that it comes down that much, and they're still hitting the under at a ridiculous rate. And I think people just tend to get scared because of that huge drop off, and they want to take the over for the most part. But for me, I think the under is really a solid look there. Another thing to mention too, from a prop perspective, I talked about some guys. Earlier that I think that are playing really well. Obviously, Marcus Smart, he's been able to hit those threes more consistently in the last few games, and I think it's correlated with Tatum really being that facilitator, right? Smart is not having to dominate the ball in or run the offense in the fashion that he normally does, and he's able to sit in the pocket in the corner and hit those threes. So I think he's because of the way that their offense switched over from games 1, 2, and 3 to 3 to 6. Marcus Smart threes might be a good way to go. Obviously, I think I mentioned Caleb Martin, who's been really impressive, and if he continues to if he starts in game 7, he's definitely a look for the overs. Jimmy Butler, obviously, he's going to have to be a big part of this Miami team if they want to win. Maybe a look towards his points because he's probably going to dominate the ball as far as the attempts, because he did attempt 21 shots from the field. Probably going to play majority of this game, if not the whole game, depending on what the score is. During through periods of this game, but for the most part, those are some of the guys that I want to look at, or from a prop perspective. Do you see any? I think your best bet is a prop, but do you see any other guys that you could probably look towards, maybe Bam or something?
Yeah, I'm I'm talking one of the guys you actually mentioned already, but I'm talking points. There were a couple guys that really stood out to me. Rebounds too. I mean, you saw the amount of rebounds, you saw the amount of shots
Yeah.
from the game. I mean, there were three guys on Miami's team that had double-digit rebounds, and Caleb Martin led the way with 15. So,
Hmm.
we saw three forwards slash, I mean, Caleb Martin's a three, I guess, in all reality. So, three forwards there with Tatum, Butler, and Martin pick up double digit rebounds there. So, I think a defensive or steals or blocks may be in play here too for some of the guys. Again, I feel like a lot of this gambling world is going to be correlated because back to what we kind of said before, if you like that under, I'm looking rebounds. I'm attacking Caleb Martin, who I'm attacking Jimmy Butler, I'm attacking Jason Tatum. Maybe not
Hmm.
even Jason Tatum just because his number could be inflated just because of, he was the only guy on the Celtics team last game that put up double digit boards. But Miami's got three guys that showed that they could do it in the last game. That could be an opportunity to, attack some value there. But if you do think, Miami can pull it off, you think we're going points here, then, that is going to be my best bet points wise.
Hmm.
But, I think there are plenty of opportunities to attack with, steals and blocks too, even with some of those defensive minded guys on that Celtics team. If you think that's the way that the game's going to be led without question.
Yeah, no, Derek White, he had one steal and three blocks in that game, in that last game there. I think the rotation just gets a lot tighter. So these guys are playing heavy minutes. So usage is always going to be there. A lot of the times when you look at these types of games, these under games, you would think under props. But if they're playing majority of the game, like they do here in the game sixes and game sevens, they typically go over just because of that. You know what I mean? Like so, that's an interesting look there from a prop perspective. Let's actually get into the best bet section now, Jeff. Since you were talking about some of these props here, and talking about the Heat side, go ahead and talk about your best bet and also what you got going over at wagertalk.com.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So my best bet actually MLB play just went off. So I got nothing up currently at the moment, but I'm waiting on these starting lineups officially tonight because depending on what I see, this Caleb Martin over 15.5 points that I got for my best bet very well could be premium play for me. I just want to see that they put Caleb Martin in the starting lineup like they should again for this game. I mean, he
Yeah.
started for the first time in this series in the last game, and he's put up double digit points in every game of the series. He's averaged over 18 points per game, and he's gone over this number in 4 out of the last 5, despite only starting one of those. And the one that he did start, I mentioned it earlier, he led the team in rebounds. He was second on the team in scoring behind Jimmy Butler. He shot over 50% from the field and he shot 50% from 3 point range. He's gone over this number in 3 straight home games, putting up over 18 points per game. And, one thing that you alluded to too, Ron, getting the opportunity is huge. And as a starter, even off the bench, he could see 32 plus minutes. But Caleb Martin's gone over this number in 5 straight games where he's played 32 or more minutes, and he's averaged 20.4 points per game in those games. I think he was a huge part of that offense, and I think they'd be making a big mistake to get away from it, despite the fact that they lost that last game. Obviously it was competitive. Obviously they held, an edge for most of that for the end of that fourth quarter before they gave it up on that last shot. But, I think Caleb Martin has to be a huge part here. And if he's putting up 32 plus minutes, it's almost guaranteed at this rate, with how he's been playing, that he gets at least 16
Mhm.
points. And we could see him put up, many more than that. And I like this, honestly, if he's coming off the bench. But like I said, if I do see him, back in the starting lineup, that to me pretty much solidifies in a game 7 that he'll get 32 minutes or more in this game and he'll see that serious
Mhm.
time, which, with those opportunities he's proven he can take advantage of it. So I like Caleb Martin over 15.5 points tonight, minus 150.
Yeah, I think maybe cut off a little bit there, but I definitely agree with that there. Hopefully he does start because I think he did pretty well in that starting lineup. Like we mentioned, that 21 points, 15 rebounds, and like you said though, even if he comes off of the bench, he's still been able to get over his points props for the most part. And I think the way that he's been playing recently, I don't think his minutes are gonna change too much from the previous game there, but. I do like that play a lot there. Whether or not they go over or under their total, he's going to be one of the key guys to look for as far as coming from the points perspective. All right, so mine is going to be what I talked about earlier. It is going to be the under. A couple of things that I mentioned earlier since 2002, game sevens in round 2 or later, 26-9 to the under. And also, like I said, this is not a situation that's uncommon for the Celtics here. They've been in this situation multiple times in the last couple of seasons, postseasons, and they've been going under in the same spot. The couple examples, like I said earlier, Celtics beat the Bucks last season, game 7, 109-81. In the last round, the Celtics took care of the Sixers 112-88, and it actually is something that what Jeff mentioned too. The Celtics can go over their team total, but the full game go under. So that is another way to look. The other thing too to mention is the home favorites in this situation, coming off of a win. They did pick up a lot of momentum, and typically the games in this series have been correlated. If you think the Celtics are going to win, I think it's an under type game. I think the Celtics do complete the comeback here. They end up winning this game. Whether or not they cover, I'm not too sure, but I do trust that the under might be the best way to go here. So that's my best bet for today's show. And for Game 7, that is a premium play as well. So I gave that out to my clients this morning. Other than that, nothing really up for baseball. Been hitting WNBA recently for the most part. Currently number one in profit in WNBA over at Wager Talk. Season's really early, so hopefully we just continue cashing in the WNBA. I know, Jeff, you do more than just NBA, right? I mean, obviously you do baseball. Are you doing anything else right now as far as betting on sports?
No, I've been keeping my eye on the WNBA because, especially in these summer months, it's something that, you almost follow without knowing that you follow it because you pay attention to
Yeah,
it. So I've been dabbling a little bit, but no, currently baseball is my pride and joy that I've been rolling with this summer. We had a nice
like
run
it.
last
Yeah.
summer, so looking forward to continuing it this year.
Awesome. All right. Well, guys, with that said, that is the end of the show. We gave out our best bets. We broke down game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. And, we'll see when our next show is. I don't know if we're going to have a show on Wednesday or Friday, but, obviously the finals is up next. We're closing out the NBA playoffs here. So till Wednesday, I guess we're going to have a show on Wednesday. Till Wednesday, good luck with all your action. Peace.